You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options. Facebook.com/TheOptionsInsider or via questions at TheOptionsInsider.com.
Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Acuna Capital. Known as the new wave in tech and trading, Acuna is a leading derivatives market maker in traditional asset classes. As one of the first trading firms to make markets on Bitcoin futures, Acuna is also proud to be an innovator in the cryptocurrency space. Through a collaborative flow of knowledge between developers, quants, and traders, Acuna designs and implements their own low-latency technologies, trading strategies, and mathematical models. To learn more about our rapidly growing firm, please visit acunacapital.com. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down all the interesting stuff going on the crypto side of the fence. So we're talking maybe some of the spot, but also the futures, some of the options going on there, the vol, the skew, all that good stuff. We'll break it all down here for you. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. Welcome to all the newcomers to this program. I love seeing where all people are coming from for this show. It definitely is. We have our core options crew, and we love you guys. But there's also a great new contingent coming in and discovering the network through this program. So welcome to all of you out there. We love seeing you and hearing from you, all your various questions. It's always exciting. Of course, the show time for this one's been moving around quite a bit. We have a lot of people beaming in and joining us all the time from hither and yon, usually in locations outside of U.S. regulatory scenes, like in Europe or Australia quite a bit in the early parts of this show, because that's where crypto is effectively thriving while the U.S. regulatory scene is still kind of figuring itself out in terms of what we want here, what we want to allow, and for a lot of the main platforms, still unfortunately, for U.S. players at least, got to go through a VPN, which makes it frustrating, I know, for a lot of our listeners. Can't help you there, but we can help you breaking down what's going on. We've been lighting up the hot seat a lot on this one recently with a lot of fun guests. Going to give it a nice little break today. Actually, have to move things up a little bit earlier today. We're doing it live a little bit earlier, right after the option block today, given some other things we have going on in the studio later today. Thought we'd move it up a little bit, but it probably will be going forward, looking live right around 1:30 p.m. Central every Monday. So right about half an hour or so after the option block. So if you join us for that one live, make sure you tune in for the Crypto Rundown. Getting a little fun early taste of it today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. The name pretty much says it all there. It's a portion of the show where we break down what the heck is going on in the leading crypto marketplace out there, which is, of course, Bitcoin. And, you know, for a lot of you, I see your email, I see your questions, your social media posts. A lot of you have wanted for a while, you know, you wanted the case to be bullish again in Bitcoin in particular, but of course, a lot of the altcoin as well. And you haven't needed much of late. We've seen a protracted rally out there across most of the major crypto products out there the last few weeks, certainly for the last few shows. Last week, we took a bit of a breather, obviously. Things sold off a little bit, taking some profits back to the upside. And upside pretty strong coming into today's show. Coming into Showtime, actually not that long ago when we first started analyzing and getting things put together for the show, crypto, we saw Bitcoin was at about 53.20. So it was up a little bit north of 200, right around 213 handles from last show. It was about 51.07 on the last show. And then since then, just in the last hour or so, we've seen that rally continue. It's up about 260 now. Coming into Showtime, it's about 53.64 here on the spot Bitcoin on the major venues here. So yeah, that rally continues to be pronounced here. So those of you who maybe thought it was taking a break last week and that was maybe the top for the near term, not so much, breaking through it here to the upside. I know a lot of you like the technicals in the crypto as well, and we're seeing a lot of people chatting about long-term reversals, perhaps bullish reversals going on out there in the Bitcoin as well. A lot of you like relative strength. That one seems to be pretty popular in the crypto space, and we saw that moving above some key levels out here in Bitcoin just very recently in the 55 or so a range out there. So those of you out there who are looking at these technicals as a way to be perhaps an indicator that is safe to dive back in, that the trend has turned, the worm has turned in Bitcoin, at least that one indicator, perhaps showing that maybe there is more upside. Maybe 6,000 is the next upside, to the next level to be tested, as opposed to maybe something on the downside. Those of you out there in the bullish camp, they'll say watch for about 4,500 on the downside again. So kind of splitting the difference, roughly 700 handles to the north and to the south there, which will be interesting in either event. If we hit that 4,500, the bears will be back out saying, look, see, I told you so. So interesting stuff there. But yeah, this recent and this rallying continuing into today on strong volume, we'll get to that in a little bit, is pretty interesting stuff, and just adding fuel out there to the legion. I know you were out there, your legion of crypto bulls out there who wanted your case. And the case is still pretty strong, it seems like, coming into this show at least. Let's look out here to the areas we like to sink our teeth into, the vol, the skew, the options activity, all that fun stuff. All this data, again, coming courtesy of our friends over there at skew.co. That's SK3W.co. If you haven't checked it out, first off, it costs you nothing. They put all this data out there completely for free. You don't even need an account. So SK3W.co, they were on the show a few episodes back. Great guys. Great data. For those of you who really want a lot of the derivatives data, things you're used to sinking your teeth into on the options side of the fence, the skew, the realized vol, the term structure, all that good stuff, they've got it for you there. So check it out. It's a phenomenal tool. I talk to a lot of people who are trading this stuff professionally in the marketplace, and they're using this. This is the place they're all going. So if you're interested in dipping your toes in these waters, or if you're just looking to try your luck at it and learn a little bit more about what's going on, this is the place to go. They're not paying us anything to do it. I just love what they have out there. So check it out if you're at all remotely curious. And if you're listening to the show, you probably are. If you're remotely curious about all things crypto vol and things, sk3w.co, the place to go. If you did that right now, you'd see, interestingly enough, the realized vol is pretty much unched from where it was last week. So we haven't seen any change. It's still at about a 68. Which is, again, this is the 1 month kind of realized vol we've seen out there, which is kind of interesting because we have seen some movement out there, but it's pretty much unched. It's kind of spiked off those lows. It got down to around roughly 25, I think, a few episodes ago, so a few weeks ago, and that was kind of the near-term nadir for realized vol. Not a heck of a lot going on in the Bitcoin front, and then once that worm turned, the bull started to kick into high gear. That's when we saw the realized vol exploding. People obviously always have this downside bias when they're talking volatility. They look at things like the VIX and the S&P. They think downside equates to volatility, and usually you're right. But again, movement is movement, and movement is volatility at the end of the day. So we have seen some extraordinary movement. It has been mostly to the upside, but extraordinary movement nonetheless, and that translates into a little bit of vol and remaining firm this week, not coming in as some people thought it might. So yeah, hovering at that 68 vol. People asking about the realized versus implied vol, I think in the listener questions. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. Stay tuned for that. Unfortunately, what it's not translating into is a ton of options volume. And Deribit's one of the big platforms out there, and you can kind of pick your poison. People like BitMEX, like others. Most of them are pretty much difficult obstacles for a lot of U.S. traders to use. But that said, Deribit is the platform a lot of people like to go when they're looking at the options volume, the skew in particular. So that's kind of where we're looking to see what's been lighting it up. And remember, they quote these in notional. It's a little bit different than your traditional options market where they look at contract volume and things like that. They don't really quote contract volume in the crypto space. They quote notional So bear that in mind when you're hearing these numbers here. And it's been a relatively quiet week since our last show. The biggest day in terms of options volume over there on Deribit was actually the 17th. We're nearly 9 million in notional changing hands. The rest of the week kind of slight, I should say, down to about, we saw 3 million some days. Actually, and I take that back, 9.7. It hit up to 9.7 million on, which day was that? On actually total. Sorry, my data was flipping on me for a second there, but it was 8.7 million on the 17th. That is the high. And then after that, it got down to 2.9 million on the 19th. And so it hasn't kind of been lighting it up. The recent highs we saw came back in earlier in April, actually the 1st. So April Fool's Day. Remember, that's kind of where this rally really took off. And I lost track of how many people were writing into us saying, "Oh, April Fools, this is the crypto April Fools rally. This is only for fools. This is a joke." No, it's real. And they did a lot of paper that day as well. $63.5 million changing hands worth of notional on that April 1st day, to just give you some frame of reference for it. And that's pretty much the high for the last 6 months here, looking at the volume. The rest of it seems like it's mostly shy of 20 million on most days, with a few spikes beyond that. So not talking a ton of paper, but still Deribit is the place most people go. So remember, bear that in mind when we're talking about some of these skew and other numbers, open interest numbers here, because it isn't a huge amount of volume. It's not like it's, you got a CME or something where there's one aggregated venue that puts up all the paper, but they are kind of the leading player in the space. So it is worth analyzing. Let's look here to the skew. All you guys always have skew on the brain when we're talking the Bitcoin. And looking here at the June, we've been focusing on June for a while there. June is still where we'll keep looking at the skew here. Again, you can find this data for yourself, sk3w.co. If you did that, you'll see it looks like analogous to a pretty aggressive, shall we say, aggressive index, in the sense that, obviously in an equity index, you see the bid, the volatility premium, and the skew is to the put wing. And that's what we see here in Bitcoin right now. The inflection point, obviously, around that 5,000 or so level, which is near the at the money. And then the puts get really, really steep really quickly, again, indicating there's a lot of near-term downside concern, or just protect. I mean, we had Bill on the show last week who was pretty active in the crypto mining, and he made a good point that it's analogous to a lot of commodities out there where there's a producer, whether it's a grain or a crude, whatever it is, there's a producer out there, and they need to hedge themselves at a certain break-even level. And that's the same thing with the miners out there. They need to hedge themselves at some level. Maybe it's 3,500, maybe it's 2,500, something along those lines where they can no longer continue operations. And so that's probably why we're seeing an implied and indeed implicit bid to these puts and kind of getting there, because the puts get to 120 vol very quickly, down to about the 3,000, looks like 2,500 level is where they start threatening that same level. Both sides of the smile, it's a smile, but it's a kind of a crooked smile, because the calls also get up there, but it takes much longer for the calls to get up to that same level of north of 100. I guess about 15,000 on the upsides where the calls hit about 100 vol. And then they get up to about that 120 or close to it, right around 20,000. So you can see it's a very, shall we say, elongated smile to the upside. Bid to both, but one's much more stark on this. And also, there's not much downside left below 5,000. A lot less room to run below 5,000 than there is above it. So that also has something to do with the shape of that graph. So still, both sides, both smiles getting a little bit steeper this week, which is kind of interesting. The calls, I remember last week, it took you a while just to get north to 100 on that vol, and it looks like they're getting up there a little bit more now. So a little bit more juice on both of the wings here as we're looking at the options. Well, let's just look really quickly, too. I think the skew is going to tell us most of that, but I wanted to do a quick check here on the open interest as well. And it looks like they do some interesting things here. The biggest month right now for Deribit in terms of where the open interest is in April. So the front contract is about 22,200. What is it? 22,000, maybe 20. It's hard to read exactly what they're quoting it at. Looks like about 2,400 maybe, perhaps. Let's go with that. And then looks like about 7,400 for the June, which is where we're looking here. So April still has more size outstanding. We don't like to quote April because it's kind of front month now, and it's getting mostly into your gamma range as opposed to vol. June a little bit more even heads. I'm going to check out this legend here. Is not that legible. I need to dive into it a little bit to see exactly how much size we're talking at. We're talking about, looks like about 20, a little bit north of 20,000 in the May contract versus around, Looks like a little bit north of about threatening 15,000 on the July. That's July, actually. I'm sorry. July is where we're looking there for, and June, about 15,000 in the June. So, yeah, kind of a weird scatter graph here showing the open interest. Obviously, not the most intelligible of them, but it looks like that's kind of how it breaks down. Then next you get out to September. So it kind of goes April, about 22,000, and then June, about 15,500 or so, and then looks like down to about 11,000 for September. So not surprisingly, that's kind of where the action is breaking down out there on the options. Let's get to the futures now, and it's a pretty busy day out here in the CME Bitcoin futures. Coming into showtime, they're up about nearly 100 handles in that April contract, nearly 5,400, 5,390 actually of showtime, about 95 handles. Nearly 8,000 contracts on the tape just in that April contract alone. Looks like another roughly 600 or so, and you add up the other bits of the term structure. So that's pretty decent volume. Again, you're talking it's a 5x contract, so roughly 40,000 plus coins changing hands out there today. Again, depending on what your opinion is of that Bitwise data we saw a few weeks ago, that number accounts for maybe a lot more than you initially thought of the total crypto volume as well. Speaking of crypto futures out there, that's some of the big news going on. A lot of people have been asking us for a while there and asking in general in the crypto space. What's going on with the futures coming out of the ICE spinoff, expansion, call it what you will, backed there, which they're, of course, proposing the physically settled crypto futures there, the Bitcoin futures. People have been waiting and waiting, and we've actually reached out to them multiple times about coming on to this show, and they keep saying we can't really talk yet because we don't know what our situation is. And it seems like they're getting a little bit more insight. People have been waiting for a while for the regulatory space to provide a little bit of insight into what the heck they want, quite frankly, from the crypto space. What do they expect? And it seems like we got a little bit of that now. I do believe this came out of CoinDesk, this article here, talking about their CFTC chairman, maybe getting a little bit more clarity into what exactly is keeping them from approving these physically settled products over there at Bakkt. And effectively, it's apparently the firm's plan, I should say, to custody their own Bitcoin and also clear the trade through their parent company, aka ICE's clearinghouse. That might make for some interesting corporate synergies and cost savings. So they certainly like that. But from a regulatory and risk perspective, doesn't sound like the CFTC is exactly super giddy about that. So those are the two issues it seems like that are really holding them up. So all of you out there hitting us up, say, when are we going to get some actually, physically settled contracts out there? It looks like ErisX and others are also kind of caught in that regulatory loop. They're all kind of waiting. It's kind of a bit of a race now as to who's going to get some of that, a little bit of regulatory pixie dust sprinkled on them first. But it seems like for now, at least, it's not going to be backed anytime soon. Not getting a lot of love. And if those of you out there who maybe you're in the bearish camp and you needed a little bit of a sign that the worm is about to turn on crypto, then perhaps I offer you the following for your edification, enjoyment, call it what you will. Maybe this is a sign that the worm is going to finally turn on crypto, because it was revealed recently, some savvy folks digging through filings out there, as they are wont to do, and they discovered that Serena Williams, tennis star, has secretly put together a VC firm called Serena Ventures. Launched it back in 2014, actually, so managed to keep the lid on it for quite a while. And if you dig into their holdings, one of their biggest holdings is Coinbase. So apparently Serena Williams, a investor, maybe a size investor, we don't know. It always is weird with these celebrity investors, because sometimes they get a little bit more favorable terms than you and I, and perhaps sometimes their investment isn't as sizable as they're being led out to believe. But this is a VC fund looking to put some of our money to work. So take that for what you will out there, listening. Maybe that's a sign. Maybe you love Serena Williams. Maybe that's a bullish sign to you, or maybe that's a sign that it's all gotten a little bit crazy, a little bit haywire. Either way, I will leave that to you guys to make your own determinations as we keep on rolling out of the Bitcoin and into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we talk about everything except for Bitcoin, except for this part here at the top of it, where I break down the market cap. Remember, the Deribit, or so the Bitwise stuff. So maybe take some of these market caps, places like CoinMarketCap and CoinDesk, all of them quote these numbers. Maybe take the overall numbers with a bit of a grain of salt, but I think the percentages are probably still fairly reliable. So maybe just in where they rank on the list is maybe more insightful than the overall level of market cap. So bear that in mind as we're crunching these numbers here. Number one, Bitcoin, of course, with about 94, almost 95 billion, firmly in the number one spot. Number two, good old ETH, knocking on the door there, about 18.2 or so billion out there for a firm number two, putting some strong distance between itself and good old XRP, aka Ripple, with about a little bit north of 13, about 13.3 billion. Remember, for a while there, they were kind of jockeying for pride of place of who was number two. ETH clearly in the driver's seat now. Number four, good old EOS, call it what you will, with about the distant number four, 5.6 billion. Number five, Bitcoin Cash, once again, 5.25 billion, knocking Litecoin out of the top five there, which is only a paltry 4.75 billion coming in at number six. So maybe a little bit of a dance going on there between Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash as well, which is always interesting to see. A little bit of fervor, a little bit of jockeying going on out there in these products that we like to watch so much. Let's start at the top here. Let's go to our old friend, good old Ripple, aka XRP. You know, it kind of got a nice little pop there a couple of weeks ago. Got up to about 36 cents or so. People saying, okay, finally we're out of this weird 30 to 30 odd 2 cent range we've been mostly stuck in for the better part of the year here, at least this year. I know, of course, previously we saw it gap up all the way north of $3 on the rumors that Coinbase is going to add it. So now fast forward some time and it seems kind of locked in this range. Of course, numerous competitors have kind of come on the horizon as well. We got the JPM coin and others coming to play in that payments game. So maybe some people a little bit more leery of XRP than they were a while ago. Either way, though, it's back up a little bit again this week. We were hovering around. It took a break last week, went down from 36 cents down to 32. Back up now to about 33 over here this week. So not a huge move for XRP, up about 0.5% today as well. So a decent day for XRP. And not a ton of movement, but still, again, better than retesting that 30-cent low there to the downside. ETH also getting back some of what it gave up last week. It was about 165 at showtime last week. This week coming into showtime up to about 172 out there. So feeling a little bit of low. Up pretty strong again today, up nearly 2% today. So not a bad pop here today for good old ETH. Let's also grab our old friend Litecoin. It was $79 last show. Remember, it had dropped from 88 down to 79, so a fairly precipitous plunge there for Litecoin. Still doing well. Percentage-wise, it was, of course, the winner for Q1 here in the crypto space, at least of the major coins. And now today, it's off that a bit again, down to about 77 here, even though it's up about 1.4% today. So interesting stuff. Litecoin maybe it's not surprising that it's coming off a bit, given how much it's exploded to the upside of late. It's not outlandish that people would be out there taking profits out there, but still, for those of you out there who trade such things, are looking for the bullish story out there, and then at least for the last couple of weeks, it's been somewhat challenging out there in the Litecoin market. I'm just looking here really quickly while we're talking, listeners, to see if I can get. I know ETH is another marketplace that seems to have a little bit of penetration when it comes to the derivatives. I just want to pull up here really quickly to see if I can see any interesting developments, or trades, or pops here from a overall vol or skew perspective compared to where we were last show. Remember, a lot of this data coming from our friends over there at Skew. The 1 month realized out there in ETH right now is a little bit north of where it is in Bitcoin. It's about 76.5. So interesting stuff here compared to where it is. Also looking at the paper, again, it's lighter volume than you're seeing in Bitcoin options over there on Deribit, but still decent paper. You're getting roughly 1 million or so contracts. Most of the days, 1 million, not contracts, 1 million notional, of course. And the big day was back on the 7th of April with about 4.25 million. So size-wise, you're talking quite a bit less than Bitcoin, but still a decent amount, enough to kind of sink our teeth into here. The skew, though, is a bit of a weird beast. And looking at it right now, it seems actually fairly flat, with the puts getting to 100 vol around a little bit shy of the 100 level. Looks like around the 80 or so level, 75 level, whereas the calls take a little bit longer to get up to that same level of volatility. So a little bit shallower curve there, little slope on the call wing. It gets up to about 400 on the upside before it can hit a similar level, but still, it's eerily flat. And got this weird aberrant data point here too. Looks like a crazy trade went up of a 400 plus vol on the put. So I'm going to toss that one out. That's probably making this chart look a little bit crazy here. But again, you don't have a ton of paper, so when you see those aberrant prints, it's going to mess with the data a little bit more than some of the more liquid contracts. All right, let's keep on rolling. I know you guys have some questions about the vol and some other things, so let's get into your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, you got questions. We will try to have the answers. Again, it's an evolving space, so it's kind of interesting to see what people are thinking about various areas here. Let's start off here. Angelo wants to know, why do you guys usually quote realized 30-day vol for Bitcoin instead of the implied? Surprising that since you're an options guy. I agree. We look at implied a lot because that's obviously, if you're not familiar listeners, that's the level of volatility that the options are actually implying via their prices. And we look at those a lot to see what the market is expecting for volatility, obviously. We obviously look at realized a lot too, because that's what the marketplace is actually delivering. We talk the realized versus implied premium, aka the risk premium, all the time on programs we do like Volatility Views. So it's not a concept that we don't talk about a lot. But on crypto, as you've noticed, and maybe a few others as well, I tend to lean a lot. Maybe some of our other guests go in different directions, but I tend to lean on looking at this. I tend to look at the realized. I do that for a couple of reasons. First off, like we mentioned, the volume is still kind of scattered and still kind of light when you're talking the options. So in order to have reliable implied vols, obviously you need reliable type quotes. And we're starting to see that emerge in the crypto space, but depending on the venue where you're looking at, you can see maybe the spreads differing wildly. Not a lot of paper going up on one venue versus another, so it's kind of hard to get a reliable quality implied level from these versus realized. You can't really game that. That's exactly what the marketplace has been delivering. So we've kind of been focusing on that rather than getting lured down the weeds of the implied levels. Granted, there's some of that when you're looking at skew and other things like that. It's kind of unavoidable. If you want to go down that road, you kind of have to deal with that. But that's in general, speaking for myself, why I've leaned more towards talking about the realized, because it's something you guys can actually sink your teeth into and go see in a measurable and quantifiable easily across a wide variety of platforms versus the implieds that are kind of hit and miss depending on where you're looking for your quote. So that's my 2 cents on why I like to go realized business. Implied doesn't mean implied is wrong or not usable or not viable. It doesn't provide you any information. It's not quite the same thing as looking at a deep liquid SPY option, for example, where you can look there across different venues and it's pretty much the same market and you don't have to really worry about it. It's very tight. Not quite the same beast when you're looking at the Bitcoin options. Nelverse wants to know, does the Bitcoin option skew show that it will continue to rally or sell off? Well, I kind of just broke that down earlier and looking at the June skew again, I have it up here again. You guys again can go find that for yourselves to see it for yourselves. And you could see that the bid is still obviously markedly to the puts. That's not to say that it can't rally. Of course, we see that set up all the time in the broad equity indices, right? Things like SPY or the Qs, whatever, they have that kind of same setup. Maybe not quite as steep of a slope to the puts as the crypto does. So that would cause me to lean that in the near term. The concern is to the downside. The hedging, the interest is definitely in the downside. But that doesn't mean equity indices continue to rally, despite the fact that puts have been bid forever. So just because the puts are bid doesn't mean that it's going to turn around and immediately just drop to the downside. That's just where there is a strong interest and demand. Skew at the end of the day is just supply and demand. That's all it really is. And so the demand is clearly for the downside puts right now. I think a lot of that has to do with people hedging their infrastructure and their production. I think that's going to remain that way for the foreseeable future because that's just the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the quote-unquote commodity that it is right now. And so I think that's what it's... I'm not seeing any big prints that are showing me one way or the other. Oh, immediate sell-off or immediate rally. Seem a little bit of a juicing up of the vol on both wings, which showed me there's activity on both. But so yeah, right now we haven't seen any big prints or anything outside of the fact of it's pretty much the same shape as it was, a little bit steeper, but it's roughly the same as it was the last few shows now. So I haven't seen anything in the near term that's going to show me, hey, the worm's turning one direction or the other. Meanwhile, crypto has been rallying. So take that with a grain of salt here, as we're seeing the bid to the puts, but the crypto continues to rally. So it doesn't mean it can't rally at all just because the puts are bid. But right now, that's what we're seeing. Let's see here. Question about covered calls on Bitcoin dollar. Simone wants to know, is it possible for American retail traders to trade covered calls on Bitcoin USD? I think that trade would have fared well for most of Q1 outside of the last few weeks. Yeah, outside of the last few weeks, I'm kind of with you. That would have done all right. The holding of the underlying has been the part that would have bit you in Q1, and then, of course, the last couple of weeks, it would have rallied back and you would have done all right. Then the call side would have bit you. So it would have been a little bit of a tale of two cities there for writing covered calls. You know, that's an interesting question. I want to get more of the venues on as they start to get more elaborate with their derivatives offerings to see exactly how they're going to treat this. I want to get some of the big ones on, like the Krakens and the Coinbases, so we could pick their brain. Obviously, they don't really have listed options in that traditional sense yet, so they're not ones you can go to for this. You still have to go to the Deribits and the BitMEXs and others, and that has all the inherent challenges therein. BitMEX, for example, still says you need a VPN for the U.S., and if you don't, if you try to use that and they catch you, they're going to shut down your account. So are you going to be able to call them up and say, hey, I want to have my calls offset against my underlying? I don't know. I'm assuming they're there from that perspective for the customers who are allowed to trade it. But for you in the U.S., and you specifically asked about U.S. retail, I don't think it's there yet for the lion's share of the venues. And the ones that are going to be savvy enough to understand that, they're still undergoing regulatory approval, or maybe they have, paltry volume. We had the LXD guys on a few weeks ago. They have some interesting stuff, but it's all mostly warrants. And it's all mostly for the European clientele because that's who can trade it because of the regulatory scene regime we're in now. So, yeah, unfortunately, if you're on the savvier end of the retail spectrum here in the States, this is one of the few times where our regulation is kind of lagging behind the rest of the world. Other venues, other areas, other regions appear to be far more savvy when it comes to allowing people to have access to this. Whereas us, we want to take our time. I understand. It makes sense. You don't want to have people get ripped off. And there's scammers galore, trust me, out there in the Bitcoin space, just waiting to take your dollars. So it makes sense that our regulators would take a bit of a more hesitant approach with it, but maybe a little bit of clarity into what they're looking for would be nice, and I think we're starting to get some of that. So hopefully that would be, I'm going to do, Simone, I'm going to table your question, and I'm going to come back to it, maybe get some of the people from the different venues on and ask your question to them directly. Might be kind of interesting to see what they say about this. But right now, yeah, for the typical, you say you're a 10-lot retail trader you're used to doing covered calls on Apple through your TD account. Oh, TD actually is an investor in RSX, so maybe they'll get there before the other big brokers. But right now, unfortunately, be able to do covered calls on the old Bitcoin, still a bit of a bridge too far, unfortunately, I believe, on most, I should say, of the venues out there. All right, everybody. That music means we've kind of come to the end of a nice kind of quick trip through the crypto landscape. Hope you really enjoyed it. We'll be back again next week around this time, actually 1:30, when we're ending up now is when we'll usually be starting. Have some great guests lined up in store for you. Should be fun. Hopefully you're liking, judging by your feedback, you guys are liking this. So we're glad you appreciate it. And we like bringing it to you. Quite frankly, it's always fun to have new markets to sink our teeth into and watch them grow, watch them evolve, watch them start to have more liquidity, more open interest, more volatility, more things that we as options traders like to sink our teeth into. It's starting to get there, which is kind of nice. Still not there for people like Simone yet, but it's getting there, which is kind of nice. So if you guys have a question, I know you do. You know how to hit us up. Add options on most of the major platforms. You can join us live, ask your questions live there as well. And until this time next week, actually stay tuned to the network because we'll have more fun stuff coming at you this week. Maybe some live interviews, maybe some other fun stuff. Lots of good stuff in store for you this week. So stay tuned to the Mixler link if you're listening to that. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.